I just checked out of curiosity. I checked in the past, but I just checked again to see if there were any reviews for the ps2 era Koei games, Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11, Nobunaga's Ambition Rise to Power, and Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle. Only Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 has a few reviews. So I figured I would throw together this video to discuss these three games. They're all very similar to one another, and they've all got the same set of problems, really. So we'll start with Nobunaga's Ambition Rise to Power. The game has a pretty robust diplomacy system. There are marriages. You can negotiate with the Imperial Court to get titles, to get stat boosts. You can negotiate with the Shogunal Court to get, same thing, titles for stat boosts. And you can negotiate with various daimyo in order to do various things. You can coordinate joint attacks on other forces. You can just come up with an alliance just to prevent them from attacking you. You could become their vassal. That way they never attack you again. You could try to force them to become your vassal through diplomacy. So the diplomacy system for this game is a bit interesting. There's a bit to it. And that actually goes for these other two games as well. They have the same diplomacy system, more or less. The combat system is where Nobunaga's Ambition Rise to Power is a bit lacking. You've got real-time tactical battles where you control units. Each general controls one unit. And there are the field battles, and then there are the sieges. In the field battles, it's just your forces against their forces, and you're trying to capture either the enemy's command fortress or kill the commanding enemy's individual unit. And if you just kill enough of the enemies, they retreat, and then you go into the siege battle, or if they don't have any troops left, the siege battle is skipped. The problem is that you can bait the AI into attacking you one unit at a time by moving all of your own units to one side of the map, and then the AI will attack your undefended fort, and they'll only send one unit, and then you can just move all your troops back and kill them, and you can repeat the strategy over and over. So the AI is not that sharp. Also, and this is the problem with the other two games as well, the AI will assign incompetent people to lead units. So they'll have someone with poor leadership stats as generals of armies. The AI does a pretty good job of administrating their realm, though. They'll very quickly build up a strong fortress, strong fortifications at their castle. They'll very quickly build up a strong economy, good food reserves, and so on. And actually, I think the AI artificially has an advantage. I'm not sure. I didn't code the game, but I think the AI actually has an advantage in that they seem to accumulate more resources than you do. Definitely horses and firearms, but whatever. It's acceptable because otherwise the game would be a total joke in terms of difficulty. If the AI didn't have some sort of advantage, this game would be ridiculously easy. And that's the main problem with all three of these games, is that for various reasons, they're all too easy. During the siege battles, you don't even need to do anything but send in a few cannons to a specific spot, wherever it happens to be on each particular map, to shell the castle. You don't actually have to attack any of the outer fortifications, 90% of the time anyway. And if you just shell the castle, the AI almost never responds. They won't come out to attack you, especially if you set, a few units to guard your cannons. Yeah, that makes the siege battles a total joke. So, yeah, the game is just too easy. It's an interesting game. It's got some cool concepts, especially in terms of civil administration, but just the ease with which you can complete the game, lack of difficulty in the battles, it just makes all the work that went into the civil administration and diplomacy aspects of this game seem pointless. It's like, why would I even try to vassalize these other daimyo if I can just conquer them in a couple turns anyway? It's like, what's even the point? I mean, you would only ever do it to save maybe 1 or 2 turns out of laziness. There's actually really no point to engaging with the diplomacy other than the shogunal and the imperial courts to get titles. Now, Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle actually managed to rectify to some extent, managed to rectify the problem with Nobunaga's Ambition Rise to Power, in that it doesn't really matter what the AI does. Like, the dumb decisions of the AI will still enable it to be a fearsome force, because you can't just bait the AI as easily as you can in Rise to Power. And that's because the game is fundamentally different. No longer are there real-time tactical battles. The battles are in real time, sort of, but they're all overhead view, so you don't actually directly control exactly what's happening in the battle. They simply play out in real time. You order your units around, and then the battles just play out. Like, you'll see the units fighting one another on the overhead map, and you don't really have any direct control over, what's happening, like you do in Rise to Power. So the game is more balanced in that way. The incompetence of the AI in assigning commanders isn't that big of a deal, because the actual number of troops and the type of equipment is more important in Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle than the commanders, unlike in Rise to Power, where actually the equipment and the commanders don't really matter. All you have to do is outsmart the AI, bait the AI into attacking you, and then you can defeat the enemy that has a bunch of cavalry or firearms. Even with spears, you can defeat them. So Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle is more balanced in that respect. But the game is still too easy in that the AI will almost never attack you if you just have large numbers of troops at a location. And also, in Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle, it's extremely difficult to actually besiege something if they have firearms. Firearms are just ridiculously powerful in Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle. Once you accumulate firearms, you don't even have to really worry about anything. Or alternatively, you can just build a large standard infantry force, a large force of pikemen, and you can still win really easily. The game's just a joke in terms of difficulty. I really don't have anything to add to Iron Triangle. It's just, it's not a very in-depth game. It's got the same diplomacy system as Rise to Power, but it doesn't really matter so much how you place things within your fief. You can place buildings basically wherever, and it doesn't really matter. The city planning aspect of Iron Triangle is not as important. You can place your buildings practically wherever, because the AI doesn't attack structures like they did in Rise to Power. You see, in Rise to Power, you would really want to think about where you want to place, this or that district. Do I really want to place the market district right next to the castle when I could place something more important right next to the castle? That way it's more easy to defend. Because the AI would almost always attack structures during a siege battle if your force was too powerful. So if you had too many defenders, they're not even going to attack the castle. They're just going to destroy everything in the city. In Iron Triangle, that is not the case. You can place everything without really worrying about the AI attacking it. Stuff will still get incidentally destroyed if it's near the castle, but whatever. I mean, things can be rebuilt very quickly in Iron Triangle, unlike in Rise to Power, in which it took years to get even one district fully completed, at least if you had poor officers, anyway. In Iron Triangle, even if you have a poor officer, the longest it will take to fully develop even the most complicated districts is a year. Another major change is that Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle requires research to use new technologies, unlike Rise to Power, which required you to acquire a new rank, which you got for simply conquering various territories. So, regardless of how developed your cities are, as long as you have so many of them, you unlock the new technology. In Iron Triangle, you have to have the correct officers with the correct aptitude to research a technology. Then you have to have enough academies. Then you have to have the money, and then you have to have all of these officers in the same location, and then they have to spend the time to actually undertake the research. It's kind of an interesting addition, but it's so difficult to actually get the officers together to get the higher technological tiers that it's kind of frustrating, actually. I would have preferred that they had went the Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 route, in which officer aptitude is irrelevant, and there's a general technology point counter that's accumulated through various things, and then you just need the money. That would have been preferable, in my opinion. Iron Triangle is also an easier game in that if you're allied with the last force standing, no matter how large they are, you just win the game by default. So if you're allied with the last remaining daimyo and they have half of Japan, and you have half of Japan, you win the game. That was not the case in Rise to Power. In Rise to Power, you had to conquer. This is in total contrast to Rise to Power, which required you to conquer every single fief in the game, or at least have them as your vassal. I actually prefer the Iron Triangle system. It makes the game shorter. Yeah, overall, Iron Triangle, it's just too easy. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 is probably the easiest of all three of these games, because even with officers that are garbage in terms of their military stats, as long as they have high intelligence, they can endlessly trick low intelligence enemy generals. So the game's a joke in that respect. I mean, if you're up against a force that doesn't have a lot of intelligent generals, then you're guaranteed to win. And the AI, just like the previous two games, but it's especially bad in this game, they always send really incompetent people to command forces. So you'll see a force of like 8,000 spearmen, and then they're commanded by someone with a really low leadership score. And then they have like just for reference, the aptitudes in both Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 and Nobunaga's Ambition Iron Triangle are just like this. So D is the lowest aptitude, then it goes to C, B, A, and then S is the highest aptitude. So in Iron Triangle, the AI will send someone with a low leadership skill, and then they'll have like a D or a C aptitude, and they're commanding like 8,000 or 9,000 troops. That's how dumb the AI is. And they'll do it constantly. And that's why Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 is just a total joke in terms of difficulty. Especially since they'll send... This is the other thing that they'll do. If they don't send someone with really low aptitude and leadership score, they'll send someone who's actually competent, but they're really dumb, so that they'll have like a 80 or 90 out of 100 as their leadership, and then they'll have like an A or an S aptitude. But then they won't assign a deputy general with high intelligence to make sure that that army doesn't get, confused or tricked endlessly. So, the AI is just not smart enough to play the game. The diplomacy system in Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 is just like that in Iron Triangle and Rise to Power. You can try to coerce your enemies into submitting to you. You can form alliances. You can coordinate attacks on enemy forces. The only thing you can't do is beg for titles from a shogun, because obviously that didn't exist in China. And you can't beg for titles from the emperor. They're automatically assigned once you, conquer so many cities. Just like in Rise to Power with ranks. Overall, they're just really easy games. They're fun to play. They have really interesting civil administration systems. But, the AI just is not intelligent enough to play the game, unfortunately. They'd be amazing strategy games if, they somehow came up with some way to mitigate the AI making stupid decisions, or if the AI was simply better. If you want to know all the nitty-gritty details of all the systems of the game, I recommend you read the manual. They're not super complex. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 with the power-up kit's a little bit complex, but not really. And I just don't feel like covering them, I mean, you can read the game manual if you want to know exactly how everything works. This is just my general impressions of these three games. They're just too easy. The combat's way too easy. Which is a shame, because that's the fundamental aspect of the game. If the combat were too easy, but diplomacy or civil administration were the primary aspects of the game, I could overlook it, but when combat is the primary aspect of the game, and it's too easy, I mean, what can you say? The game's kind of a failure, in terms of creating a challenge. As much time as I've put into these games, I actually can't recommend them. I just love them because, well, there are various reasons. The soundtrack, the color is really nice, and, I love reading the little tidbits of history you get from the games. All the various officers in the game have a short description, a short biography. That's interesting to me. And the battles, though they are easy and simplistic once you learn to exploit the AI, the animations are fun to watch. So that's why I like these games, but I can't actually recommend them. They're not very difficult games. So, unless you have the same interests I do, history, a beautiful looking game in terms of color, and, you're playing a game largely for its soundtrack, I can't really recommend these 3 games. They're just way too easy for anybody that's looking for a challenging strategy game. They're great for children, and that's when I played them, was when I was a child, when they originally released. But, for an adult, I cannot recommend these games whatsoever.